There is a moment that almost everyone misunderstands. It doesn't look like success. It doesn't feel like progress. In fact, it often feels like failure. You wake up one morning and realize that the life you've been trying so hard to build no longer excites you. The goals that once consumed your thoughts feel strangely distant. The dreams that once kept you awake at night have become silent. You wonder if you've become lazy, unmotivated, broken. But what if none of those things are true? What if your ambition didn't disappear because you failed, but because it finally finished its job? Carl Jung believed that the human psyche does not move in a straight line. It moves in cycles. Just as nature has seasons, the soul has them too. There are seasons of expansion, seasons of building, seasons of love, seasons of certainty. And then there are seasons where everything grows strangely quiet. Nothing dramatic happens. No catastrophe, no breakthrough, just silence. Most people panic here. They mistake silence for emptiness. But silence is where the deepest psychological work begins, because before a forest can grow, the soil must first disappear beneath fallen leaves. Before dawn, the world experiences its darkest hour, and before you become someone new, the person you've always been begins losing its voice, not because it is dying, because it has already brought you as far as it could. By the end of this video, you may discover that the absence you've been fighting is actually the beginning of your next life. When your old self stops giving directions, imagine driving with a GPS you've trusted for years. Every road, every decision, every destination, it has always known where to send you. Then one day, without warning, the screen goes blank, the roads still exist, the car still works, you still know how to drive, but suddenly there are no instructions. Most people immediately assume something has malfunctioned, but psychologically, this moment is incredibly important because the map only disappeared after it had already taken you as far as it could. Many of us spend the first half of our lives following inherited directions. Become successful, be responsible, make people proud, avoid failure, stay acceptable. These directions are not necessarily wrong. In fact, they often help us survive. They help us build careers, relationships, reputations. But eventually, the unconscious asks a dangerous question. Now that you've become who everyone expected, who are you? That question cannot be answered by another achievement. It cannot be answered by another promotion or another relationship. It demands something entirely different. It demands that you stop moving long enough to hear a voice that has been buried beneath decades of expectation. This is why so many intelligent people experience a strange loss of momentum. Not because life is ending, because autopilot is. The personality that once carried you can no longer lead you, and although that sounds frightening, it is one of the healthiest psychological signs imaginable, because the self, the deepest center of the psyche, does not want another successful performance. It wants participation. It wants you, the real you, not the efficient one, not the admired one, not the impressive one, the honest one. And honesty always begins with silence. The winter beneath the soil. If you walked through a forest in the middle of winter, you might believe nothing is alive. The trees appear dead, the flowers are gone, the birds have disappeared, everything seems abandoned. But beneath the frozen ground, something extraordinary is happening. Roots continue growing, seeds continue changing, life continues preparing without asking for attention. Human transformation often follows the same rhythm. Our culture only celebrates visible growth, degrees, promotions, engagements, awards, followers. But the unconscious has never cared very much about appearances. It is interested in something slower, something almost invisible, depth. Think about the strongest tree you've ever seen. Its strength was never built above the ground. Its strength was built in places nobody could photograph. Your character develops the same way, not while everything is going according to plan, But while your old plans quietly stop making sense, perhaps that is why this stage feels so uncomfortable. Nothing outside confirms that anything meaningful is happening, yet inside, an entirely different architecture is being constructed. You cannot see it yet, but one day, other people will call it wisdom. They will call it confidence. They will call it presence. What they won't see are the silent winters that built it. There comes a season when even your dreams become quiet, not because you stopped caring, because the version of you who wanted those dreams is slowly disappearing. This is one of the strangest experiences a human being can have. For years, you chased something with absolute certainty. You sacrificed weekends, relationships, sleep, peace. You believed, when I finally get there, everything inside you would settle. Then one day, you arrive, or perhaps you come close enough to see it clearly, and something unexpected happens. The excitement is gone, not dramatically, almost respectfully, like a guest quietly leaving the room. At first, you panic. You think you've become lazy, ungrateful, burned out. You try to force the old ambition back to life. You make new goals, watch motivational videos, push yourself harder. But none of it reaches the place that has gone silent, because motivation is not a machine, it is a messenger, and sometimes the messenger leaves because the message has already been delivered. The prison built from success. Most people believe suffering comes from failure. Carl Jung understood something far more unsettling. Sometimes our greatest prison is the identity that once saved us. Imagine a suit of armor. When you first put it on, it protects you. It helps you survive difficult battles. People admire your strength, your discipline, your resilience. Years pass, the battles end, but you never remove the armor. Eventually, the protection becomes imprisonment. You forget what your own skin feels like. Many identities work exactly like this. The responsible one, the achiever, the perfect child, the strong friend, the successful professional. These identities once helped you survive, but survival is not the same thing as living. One of the quietest tragedies of adulthood is mistaking adaptation for identity. You become so good at playing one role that you forget it was ever a role. Jung believed the persona was necessary. Without it, society would be impossible. But he also warned that identifying completely with the persona creates a dangerous illusion. You begin confusing your performance with your existence. Then life does something remarkable. It slowly removes your enthusiasm for the very performance you thought you could never live without, not to punish you, to invite you home. Why nothing feels right anymore? Have you noticed that things which once made you feel alive now leave you strangely untouched? You finish a project, nothing. You buy something new, nothing. You receive praise. For a moment, nothing. People often call this numbness. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is discernment. There is an enormous psychological difference. Numbness says, I can't feel. Discernment says, this no longer belongs to me. The problem is, both experiences look almost identical from the outside. Imagine listening to a radio station for 20 years. One day, without warning, the signal fades. Static replaces music. Your first instinct is to repair the radio. What if the radio isn't broken? What if the station stopped broadcasting because another frequency has already begun calling you? This is how the unconscious often communicates, not by shouting, by withdrawing energy. Where your attention used to flow effortlessly, it now encounters resistance, not because you're moving in the wrong direction, because you're walking beyond the edge of an old map. The psyche has a remarkable intelligence. It rarely argues with you. It simply stops feeding what no longer serves your growth. That loss of emotional energy can feel terrifying, especially if you've built your entire identity around constant productivity. But beneath the silence, something entirely new is gathering strength. The conversation you've been avoiding. There is a question that waits for every human being. It cannot be postponed forever. Most people spend years avoiding it, not intentionally. They simply stay busy enough that they never have to hear it. The question is not What do I want? It is what no longer belongs to me. Those are very different questions. The first asks you to collect. The second asks you to release. Growth often begins not by adding another dream, but by grieving an old one. Perhaps you were never meant to become the person you spent years trying to become. Perhaps that dream belonged to your parents, or your culture, or your fear. Perhaps it belonged to a younger version of yourself, who genuinely believed success would erase loneliness. There is no shame in that. Every identity begins with hope, but maturity means recognizing when hope has quietly transformed into habit, and habit can keep us walking long after the destination has disappeared. This is why your life feels suspended. You are not waiting for permission to begin. You are waiting for the courage to stop carrying a future that no longer belongs to you. And strangely enough, the moment you put it down, your hands become free, not to hold something new immediately, simply to feel their own weight again. For the first time in years, the life between two identities, there is an experience so strange that language barely knows how to describe it. You are no longer the person you used to be, but you are not yet the person you are becoming. You stand somewhere in between, like a traveler who has already left one country but has not yet crossed the border into the next. There is no map, no familiar language, no clear identity, only transition. Most people experience this as confusion. Jung saw something different. He believed the psyche cannot become whole without first passing through uncertainty, not because uncertainty is valuable by itself, but because certainty often belongs to the person you are about to outgrow. Think about a snake shedding its skin. There is a brief period when the old skin has loosened, but the new one remains delicate. During that time, the snake hides. It doesn't fight, it doesn't hunt, it becomes quieter, not because it is weak, because transformation requires protection. Human beings rarely grant themselves that same permission. The moment life becomes uncertain, we demand immediate answers. We search for another goal, another relationship, another distraction, anything, to avoid standing in the uncomfortable space between identities. Yet that space is where the unconscious quietly begins introducing you to yourself. The mind cannot lead you here. There is a reason thinking harder no longer works. Perhaps you've noticed. You analyze everything. You replay conversations. You make plans. You create lists. You search for certainty. And somehow, the more you think, the further clarity seems to move away. This frustrates the modern mind, because we were taught that every problem can be solved with enough analysis. But the unconscious does not speak the language of logic. It speaks through symbols, through emotion, through dreams, through attraction, through resistance. Imagine trying to understand music using only mathematics. You could measure every note, calculate every vibration, describe every frequency, and still miss the song. Your inner life works the same way. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are meant to be experienced. Jung believed that dreams often become more vivid during periods of transformation, not because the unconscious wants to confuse you, because it has begun speaking in its native language. The rational mind asks, "What should I do next?" The unconscious asks, "What part of you is ready to be born?" Those are entirely different conversations. One seeks instruction, the other seeks transformation. While you keep looking back, something curious happens. Whenever we approach real change, we begin romanticizing the past, even the parts that once made us miserable. Have you noticed that? The job you hated suddenly seems comforting. The relationship that exhausted you starts looking beautiful. The habits that limited you feel strangely familiar. Memory is selective. It edits, it softens, it removes the weight and preserves the familiarity. The unconscious knows this. That is why Genuine transformation almost always includes temptation, not temptation towards something new, temptation towards something old. The familiar has enormous psychological gravity, not because it makes us happy, because it makes us predictable. Our nervous system often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar freedom. Read that again. Many people return to lives they have already outgrown, simply because certainty feels safer than possibility. But every return comes with a cost. You do not become your old self again. You simply postpone becoming your new one. Eventually, life asks the same question again, only louder. The silent rearrangement. If someone looked at your life today, they might not notice anything extraordinary. You still wake up, still answer messages, still go to work, still pay your bills. Externally, very little appears different. Internally, an entire universe is rearranging itself. Imagine walking into an old observatory late at night. The telescope hasn't moved. The walls remain unchanged. Everything looks exactly as it did yesterday. But above, the stars have shifted. The constellations no longer point in the same direction. From the ground, nothing happened. From the sky, everything changed. Transformation often feels exactly like that. The outer structure remains stable, while your inner orientation quietly changes. The things you once chased begin losing their gravity. The conversations you once tolerated feel heavier. The silence you once feared begins feeling strangely comforting. These are not random emotional fluctuations. They are signs that your inner compass is finding a new north, not one given to you, one discovered within you. And although you cannot yet explain it, you already know something irreversible has begun. Because once the soul recognizes its own direction, it becomes almost impossible to live entirely according to someone else's. The person waiting on the other side. There is a strange misconception that transformation ends with certainty. That one morning, you simply wake up, knowing exactly who you are. Life rarely unfolds that way. More often, you notice something much smaller. You stop rushing, not because you've given up, because urgency no longer controls you. For years, you believed your life was something you had to chase. Every opportunity, every relationship, every achievement. It always felt just one more step away. And so you ran, not toward yourself, toward the version of yourself you believed would finally deserve peace. But peace cannot be caught. It can only be recognized. And recognition begins the moment you stop running long enough to notice where you already are. The weight you were never meant to carry. Imagine climbing a mountain while carrying a backpack you have owned since childhood. Every year, someone added something. A teacher placed expectations inside. Parents added fears. Society packed ambition. Friends contributed comparison. Failure slipped shame into one of the side pockets. Success, strangely enough, added pressure. You became so accustomed to the weight that you stopped questioning whether it belonged to you. Then this difficult season arrived. At first, it felt as though life was taking things away. Certainty, direction, energy, motivation. But perhaps life wasn't taking anything away. Perhaps it was quietly emptying the backpack, one belief at a time, one expectation at a time, until eventually you noticed something unfamiliar. You could breathe, not because the mountain became easier, because you finally stopped carrying other people's lives on your own shoulders. The quiet strength nobody sees. Our culture celebrates dramatic change, the new business, the transformation photo, the public victory, the inspiring announcement. But the deepest psychological victories almost never look impressive. No one applauds the day you stop needing to explain yourself. No one throws a celebration because you finally slept peacefully. There are no trophies for learning to enjoy your own company. No headlines announce that you forgave yourself. Yet these quiet moments change the direction of a life. Carl Jung believed that becoming whole was not about becoming extraordinary. It was about becoming undivided. Think about that. Not richer, not more admired, not more productive, undivided. Imagine how much energy you've spent arguing with yourself, one part wanting security, another wanting freedom, one part seeking approval, another craving honesty, one part clinging to the past, another quietly asking to move forward. The hardest season of your life was never just happening around you, it was happening between these different voices. Now, for the first time, they are beginning to speak to one another, not perfectly, but peacefully, and peace is often much quieter than happiness, a different definition of success. Perhaps success was never meant to be measured by what you accumulate. Perhaps it is measured by what no longer controls you, the opinion that no longer defines your worth, the fear that no longer makes your decisions, the memory that no longer keeps you awake, the expectation that no longer dictates your future. This is a different kind of freedom. It cannot be purchased. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be performed. It can only be lived. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For years, many of us called unconscious patterns our personality. We called inherited fears our identity. We called emotional survival our character, until one day, life interrupted the performance, not to punish us, but to introduce us to the person who had been quietly waiting underneath it all. Coming home, imagine walking through a dense forest before sunrise. You have wandered for what feels like years, sometimes following voices, sometimes following fear, sometimes following maps that belong to other people. Then gradually, the trees begin to thin. Ahead, there is no palace, no finish line, no grand reward, only a small wooden cabin. Warm light glows through the windows. Smoke rises gently from the chimney. Everything about it feels strangely familiar. You walk toward the door. You hesitate, not because you're afraid of what's inside, because something inside you already knows. You've been here before, long before you learned to perform, long before you learned to compare, long before you believed your worth depended on becoming someone else. You open the door. No audience, no expectations, no applause, only silence. A silence that no longer feels empty. A silence that finally feels like home. Perhaps this is what transformation has always been. Not becoming someone new. Remembering the person who never truly disappeared. Maybe the silence you've been resisting was never a punishment. Maybe it was protection. Maybe the confusion wasn't evidence that you were lost. Maybe it was evidence that your old direction was no longer worthy of you. The world will continue asking, "What are you doing next?" But your soul asks a different question. Who are you becoming while you wait? That question cannot be answered in a weekend or by another achievement. It is answered quietly. One honest choice at a time, one released expectation at a time, one courageous conversation at a time, one peaceful morning at a time. So if your life feels strangely quiet today, don't rush to fill the silence. Listen to it. Because beneath that silence, something is taking shape, not another version of the person you used to be, the person you were always meant to become. If this video found you at the right moment, don't carry every idea with you. Carry just one question. If no one expected anything from you, what part of yourself would finally have permission to live? You don't have to answer today, but one day, I hope you do.